Today's video contains subject matter that some viewers may find disturbing, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And thank you. This happened to me as a young girl back in the early 90s. I was around 10 at the time and was the youngest with two older brothers. Needless to say, I was bored a lot. My brothers didn't want to play with me very much, unless it was something that they wanted to do. Wrestling got old fast, especially when you have a disadvantage. So, I was often found alone in my room or complaining about being bored. The latter was a rare occurrence, because then I was told to find something to do, or to go find my brothers. You know how it goes. So, when we had a new neighbor move in with a young girl around my age, I was ecstatic. I told my mom and she agreed to let me pick out a treat to make for them and to bring them over. I chose to make brownies, and my mom and I walked over there to meet them. It was the dad that answered the door. He shook our hands, and we introduced ourselves, and then I asked about the little girl. He looked confused at first, but then replied with, "Oh, yeah, sorry," and hollered for her. For her privacy, I'm going to call her Madeline. She seemed pretty shy at first. He brought her to the door and told her my name, and tried talking a little about herself to get her to loosen up. I did get her to smile and talk some, but then we parted ways and headed back home. I had big hopes. I wanted this girl to be my friend since she lived so close. We wouldn't have to ask our parents to give us rides, we could just be there. My mom told me to hold off so that they could get settled in, and that maybe I would see her in school. However, after not seeing her for a week, I told my mom and she mentioned that she may still need to be enrolled, or maybe she was homeschooled. Sure enough, I would learn that she was homeschooled when I saw her getting the mail one day. I was already out playing in the yard when I saw her and asked her about it. She said that she was, and that it was due to their beliefs. Being a kid, and not really knowing what that entailed, I just accepted it and asked her if she could play. She said she would have to ask her dad first, and then ran back inside. After a few minutes of waiting in their yard, she came back out looking a little disappointed, but said that she couldn't play because they had things they had to do first. This seemed to happen a few times. I was starting to get upset, thinking maybe she didn't like me, or didn't want to hang out with me, so I slowly stopped asking. And that was until her dad came over to our place, looking for me specifically. He said he wanted to know if I wanted to come over for dinner and to hang out with Madeline, and I was ecstatic. I quickly jumped at the opportunity and followed him out the door and over to their place. I thought it was a little weird at first that he came over to ask instead of her, but it quickly dropped from my mind when I walked into their home. It was so colorful and organized. I know my reaction clearly showed on my face because her dad laughed and asked if I liked it. When I nodded, he said that Madeline had chosen a lot of the design. Since there wasn't a mother in the picture, she wanted her help in making it look womanly. The kitchen was yellow and seemed to have a bakery theme based on the framed pictures and utensils that they had. The living room was a royal purple and almost looked castle-like based on the furniture and fixtures. He told me I could have a seat at the table and that she would be out soon. He grabbed drinks for us, which was Kool-Aid for us and a beer for him, and then he sat at the table asking about myself. He asked what school I went to and if I liked it, what I was learning, what I liked to do, just things like that. After some time, Madeline finally came out, wearing an apron and her hair up in a clip. I watched as she went to the kitchen, made not only her plate but mine and her dad's plate, and then brought them to us. Being a kid, I thought that this was a little backwards, but then just thought maybe she was trying to be polite with company, or maybe it was just a rule that they had. Either way, it was great spaghetti with garlic bread, and we just sat there talking for a bit. Every so often, he would look at her and say things like, "She was telling me how she likes to bake too, honey," and would smile at her, and then she would do the same. After dinner, I tried getting up to take my plates to the sink when he insisted that they would get it, but instead Madeline did, and as she did the dishes, we sat and talked some more. Again, I thought it was weird and was curious. Was the dinner for her or for him? But afterwards, we got to talk some more until I had to leave. I went home and my mom asked how it went, and I told her about everything. She laughed and didn't think much of it, joking that maybe she should consider doing that to us, but she left it at that. We had a few more playdates, where he would come over or call asking if I could or wanted to hang out with Madeline, and my parents would let me. It was always a similar situation, where any housework would be done by her. He would ask me more about myself, and then we would have some time to talk. Then, one weekend, I was invited over for her birthday party. This time, it was going to be a sleepover, so I thought for sure we would be able to have some time to ourselves. I packed a small bag with all my stuff that I wanted to share with her, and I knocked on their door. Her dad answered. He welcomed me in and he showed me to her room. Of all the times that I had been over, I hadn't even seen her room yet. That was the bedroom that I dreamed of as a child. It was painted pink. It had one of those huge white princess vanities, a normal-looking dresser, and then her closet was filled with dress-up items. Dresses, uniforms. There was a chest with jewelry, accessories, and shoes. It was every little girl's dream. Again, I'm sure it showed on my face because Madeline was smiling and her dad had laughed. He said that this is what she wanted, and his princess would get anything that she wanted. Yeah, sure. My dad said I would always be his little girl, but my room didn't look like this. This was going to be fun. I asked about playing, but he said that we had to have dinner first, and we agreed. We made our way back to the dining room, and I noticed that we were having something in a bowl. It was a soup or chili or something like that. So she didn't have to make 2 trips. I stood up to grab my bowl when her dad politely told me not to, as it wasn't polite to make a guest serve themselves, and it was her job as the lady of the house. Again, kind of weird, but still a kid, so I didn't question it and sat back down. After we had dinner, I sat at the table and talked to him again as she cleaned up, and then we were finally able to go back to her room to play, as her dad said he would come in to check on us after a little bit. I thought it would go like how my parents did. Say they will, but don't until I got too loud or it was time for bed or something like that. However, not soon after we got to her room and we started talking about what we wanted to do, he came in asking what we were doing. Madeline said that we were still deciding on what to wear. He almost looked as excited as I was as he stepped into the room, going through her outfits. He was holding them up to me, making comments about how this would look great on me and this is perfect for my figure and so forth. After picking out a few things, he stood in the room, so I asked to go to the bathroom to change. He then said that it was fine and that I could change in there with her, problem really wasn't her, it was him. My parents stepped out of the room and wouldn't come in if I was changing, so the fact that he didn't even think to close the door or look the other way was weird to me. I was wearing shorts and a shirt, so I just decided to put it on over my clothes, whereas Madeline completely undressed. It was a little awkward, but I was too excited, so I just let it go. Afterwards, we paraded around and pretty much just played pretend, including her dad. He actually got on the ground, put a blanket on his back like a saddle, and then told us to sit on his back. He bucked around some, which was pretty funny too, and then he took pictures of both of us. After a while, we had cake and ice cream, and she opened a few presents that he had for her. One of the things that he got her was a nightgown of some sort. She thanked him for everything, and then he told her to try on the nightgown, so she did. And he also asked me if I wanted to change too. I agreed, and this time I was able to go to the bathroom to do so. As we got ready for bed, Madeline took me back to her room where she set me up in her canopy bed. She then pulled out a blanket and pillow from her closet and laid them on the floor next to her bed. The bed was pretty big, so I told her that she could sleep on it too, but she declined, saying that she would just sleep on the floor. For the first time, her dad came in and said goodnight, hugging both of us and shut the door. We were finally alone. She asked if I'd had a good time, and I told her I did, but being young and nosy, I asked her about her doing all the housework, and she said that she had done it for as long as she could remember and as long as she was capable. I then asked her about her schooling, and she said that she just reads different books and does different workbooks. I was conflicted on that one, because I thought that was super easy and you didn't have to get dressed for it, but then I was sad for her because, other than myself, what other friends did she have? She couldn't go to school and show her friends her new outfit, or talk about their favorite teachers, so I started to feel sorry for her. Other than that, she talked about the different states that they lived, and places they went to, which sounded pretty fun, and kind of made me wish that my family could travel around like that. However, she did say that she liked the idea of my family, of everything I had told her, and that she wished that she had a mom to do things with. So, I asked her about hers. She said she didn't remember her, and that she was just gone one day, and she never saw her again after that. Again, I was empathetic because I had a feeling that one of two things happened there, and I couldn't imagine being without my mom. I was already really close to her. Shortly after that, we ended up falling asleep, but I awoke sometime in the night having to go to the bathroom. Being that it was one of those awkward situations, I just kind of laid there and slowly opened my eyes. Then, I saw a figure standing in the doorway. I didn't know if I was just seeing things or what, so I continued to lay there, pretending that I was asleep, hoping that it would just disappear. After a few attempts of closing my eyes and then opening them, I saw Madeline get up from the floor and follow this figure out of the room. I waited for several minutes after that, until I couldn't hold it any longer, and quickly and quietly ran to the bathroom. Afterwards, I just went back to the bedroom and went back to sleep, acting like everything was normal. The next morning, I woke up to just me in the bedroom still. When no one came in after several minutes, I decided to get up and get dressed. Afterwards, I opened the door to look around when I heard noises coming from the kitchen. It was Madeline, again, making breakfast this time. Her dad wasn't around, so I helped her make everything, and she seemed to really have fun with it. Shortly after breakfast, though, I had to start packing up to go home. They both walked me to the door and said that I was welcome over there any time and for however long I wanted to be there. They both hugged me and I left. I went home to my mom in the living room and she asked me how it went. I was honest with her, and I told her it was fun, but mentioned that her dad seemed very controlling and explained everything that happened, including the dress-up part. At first, my mom chuckled and said that maybe I just misunderstood something. She just said that maybe he was very strict and that I needed to keep being nice to Madeline because she probably needed a friend. However, I wasn't allowed to go back there alone. My parents' choice. I wouldn't see her much longer that year. You see, her dad had bought her a small pool, and since they just had a chain link fence, everyone could see what was going on out there. The pool seemed like it was more for a photo shoot. One thing that I didn't mention was that my mom worked for the school board at the time, and as she put it when I was older, was curious about her homeschooling, and tried to talk with her dad about it one time. She tried to have Madeline come over for dinner one time, but he said that he had to be there too. While we were watching TV, he came into the room and quickly rushed home. She told me that she was asking him what curriculum he was going through for homeschooling, and his answers were either vague or that he avoided the question entirely. My mom began to become concerned that she wasn't being schooled at all. Then, summer came around and I tried asking my parents, and Madeline's dad, if she could go on a camping trip with me. That actually led to an argument between my dad and hers, and I didn't see Madeline for a long time after that. The next time I did see her was when there were two cops in the driveway, and they were both being escorted out, with her dad in handcuffs. My parents would only tell me that he wasn't a good person, and that Madeline was going to live with someone who would love her and take care of her. I wouldn't learn until years later as an adult what had actually happened. My mom, being around all different types of kids, could tell that there was something different about Madeline and her relationship with her dad. Me telling her about the party really set things off for her. Then, my brothers told her about the things they saw when they were out in the pool, and even made suggestive comments to my brothers about her. With my mom confronting him about the schooling, she began to worry about it more. Then, my dad had apparently said something to him, possibly threatening, I'm sure, which made him completely shut her out of my life. From there, they had visitors from CPS or something, and apparently they found some things that were not good either. I'm sure everyone can piece things together, but knowing I was so close to this situation and alone was terrifying. Now that I'm an adult with a little girl of my own, especially. There are things that you were taught as a kid to be aware of, but there are some things that just don't feel right to you, and you don't know how to react. So, all I'm gonna say is, teach your kids to trust their gut as well, because it could save them, or someone else's, life. I just hope that Madeline was able to find a real, loving family. This is actually a story about my little sister. Back in the early 2000s, my parents, myself, and my baby sister lived in a one-story house in Ohio. It had a basement that just had the laundry room and some of my dad's tools, but that was about it. Otherwise, it was a small 2-bedroom house that my dad had actually turned into a 3-bedroom in a way. There was a small room that we referred to as the den because it didn't have an actual door and the room was really small. It kind of just became a storage and plant room because it had a single window that jutted out some, so we could set small plants in it. Well, When my mom became pregnant with my sister, they didn't want me, a boy, to have to share a room with a baby, thankfully. So we cleaned out the room. My dad installed a door, and then we had a small nursery. It would do for a few years until she outgrew it. So after she was born, we settled into our life with a new baby around. I know it was nothing new for my parents, but for me, it was a new experience. I was excited for a while, being a big brother, but then came the responsibilities that, as a child, I didn't care for. Having to play quietly or play outside so I didn't wake her up, or having to get stuff from my parents or throwing things away. Overall, though, it was alright. I got used to the crying at night after some time. We did have a lot of company over that wanted to see her, so a few months after she came home, we had a small cookout, since it was close to my mom's birthday. We had a lot of people over, including family and friends, and a next-door neighbor, Vicky. Vicky was a bit out there. She was probably a little older than my parents, going by the loose skin and wrinkles that she had. Now, not that I have a problem with it, but as a kid, it was a little bit weird to me. She wore as little clothing as possible. I think she was, or maybe just thought that she was, a belly dancer. She always wore these little skirts that she always made sure to tell everyone that she made them herself. They had bells and charms all over them, and they seemed like it made it too heavy because it looked like it would just fall off. Then she typically wore a bikini top or bra with the sheer top over it. She had long dreads, and she always had all kinds of charms in them as well. Again, being older now, I dated a girl that had dreads and she took care of them. Vicky did not. They smelled really bad. She would always try to hug me, but I would have to hold my breath. She talked about fate and the stars and how they controlled us all the time. When my parents would mention something I did, she would always talk about how she could tell that I was going to grow up to do this, and that I'd be great at it, and so on. So, when she came over to see my sister, she was trying to guess her name before my parents told her. She guessed it was Angelica. Her name's Kira. Something else about Vicky was that she never had any kids. She always mentioned how she could never find the right guy to settle down with because she wanted the most perfect children in both looks and brains. So, she talked about how smart and kind I was as a kid, and that I was going to be an excellent big brother. But then, after meeting Kira, she seemed to start to talk down to me. She said that I had a lot to live up to, and that I had to help my parents and make sure that she had a successful life. I was still a kid at the time, and already having some of the attention pulled away from me, it kind of got under my skin. So I asked, "What about me? I need help too." Then her response was, "Well, there's a new baby in the house, so therefore, you have to grow up now, because you won't be the favorite anymore." My parents quickly explained that that wasn't true and that they loved us equally, but it's still not something a kid wants to hear, right? So, we tried our best to coexist with Vicky. Other than the weird stuff that was her, she was fairly harmless. She always wanted to see and hold Kira when she came over, which was still fine, but some of the things that she said would get weird. Things like, "Oh, you're just perfect. I could just eat you up." Weird things like that. Sometimes she came over with a gift or baked goods, but then would pretty much ask if she could see Kira, like they were friends, wanting to hang out. So, that was Vicky, in a very small and crazy nutshell. Sometimes, We would see her a few times a week, and sometimes we didn't see her for a whole week. However, the older Kira got, the less and less we would see Vicky. I think it was agreed upon when we got older that it was probably because she grew up and she became less interested in her. Something about baby fever, or to the likes of. We went about our lives as normal, sometimes being awoken by my sister crying, and sometimes I would sleep through the night. We had some issues during the winter where it seemed like there was a bad draft coming through the window in her nursery, so they moved her crib to my parents' room while my dad fixed up the window. Over the years, we lived as a normal family. However, it started getting weirder when Kira started to talk. Now, I will say, some of this is from what I experienced, and some things my parents would tell me over the years when we were older. When my parents would get her from her room when she woke up, she would say her normal things like, "Mama, up, eat," things like that. But on occasion, my parents would hear her start to cry, but then she would start giggling or humming and go right back to sleep. Then, it started amping up. She started saying things like, "To Mama," or "Mama too." And it took a while for us to finally figure out what she was saying. We joked about how it was because she preferred Dad, but then she started saying, "Where Mama too?" When my mom would respond saying, "I'm right here," she would say, "No, your Mama won," and then would call out and look for this Mama too. No one really knew how to handle this, so we just kind of let it go. When she came out of her room, she would look for this Mama too, but quickly lost attention and moved on. Over time, my parents began to wonder if she was seeing a ghost because of the way she would talk about this person. She would talk about seeing her when she slept, like in her dreams, but there wasn't really anything we could do about it. They tried their best to ignore it the best they could, and tell Kira that she wasn't real. However, Kira would only start talking about her more. When I was outside playing with her one time, she started talking about this person, and she said, "You have to be nice to me because Mama too said so." I was getting annoyed, so I told her that she wasn't even real. She got really mad at me, saying that she was and that she came to see her at night. I just dropped it, because at this point, I knew what a ghost was, and thinking that there was a ghost in our house was pretty scary to me as a kid. However, as annoying as she could be at times, I was also kind of scared that my little sister had to possibly confront a ghost alone, and I wanted to be the brave older brother. So, after everyone went to bed, I snuck into her room and laid under her bed. There was just enough room for me to get under there and lay flat on my stomach. I had this great plan, but I didn't think about how I would keep myself awake. I brought a pillow with me and that was it. Needless to say, I fell asleep, but I did wake up, and I heard my sister giggling and whispering. So, I groggily opened my eyes to try to focus around me, and to my horror, I saw 2 bare feet, big enough to be an adult's, with something draping around them, like a gown or something like that. I could hear them whispering things and then both of them giggling. I could only make out some of the things that were being said at times, such as, "You're just perfect." I didn't think things past what I would do once I was in here, so I was just kind of frozen in fear. It seemed like it lasted forever, but after a while, I saw the feet walk away to the other side of the bed, and then they just kind of floated upwards and were gone. I continued laying there for some time until I felt it was safe, and then ran back to my room and under the blanket with the light on until I could fall asleep again. The next morning, I told my parents that this person my sister was seeing was true and that I saw them too. I explained to them what I saw, and the color just flushed from my mom's face. She tried her best to convince me I was probably having a bad dream, and then dismissed the whole thing. Apparently, this was enough for my parents to buy an actual baby monitor, even though my sister was beyond that age at this point. Now, one night as a child, I was sleeping in my room when I started hearing my parents yelling and running. I jumped out of bed and looked out my door to see what was going on when I noticed my dad was on the phone and I could hear my sister crying. I walked out of my room and into my sister's, and I saw my mom holding her. A lot seemed to happen that night that I didn't really know or understand, except that my sister and the baby monitor were both moved to my room, and both of our windows had locks installed on them. Kira then started talking to me more about this person. She said she wasn't mean or scary, but nice, and that she helped her fall asleep. She said she was also sad because she talked about how she wanted to take her somewhere, and now she didn't know if she would ever see her again. I didn't really know what to say, other than she scared our mom and dad, and that was not okay. Some time passed, and Kira stopped talking about Mama too, and said she stopped getting visits from her, even after she moved back into her room. It wasn't until we started moving that another event would occur. My parents wanted a bigger place, so we started the moving process. We had all kinds of people over helping us out, and to our surprise, that included Vicky as well. We rarely saw her, and if we did, it was typically while she was outside in her own yard or at her mailbox. When she came over, though, she looked different. She had on pants and an oversized blouse, and her dreads were all wrapped up. While my parents were outside talking to her, Akira and I ran out to see what was going on. I noticed that Kira had stopped walking and was just staring over at our parents and Vicky. Vicky looked at us and smiled, but it wasn't her normal smile. It almost looked forced. But she finished her conversation with my parents, and as she walked away, she was saying goodbye without approaching us and just kind of left. My sister really didn't see her much as she got older, so my parents had to explain who she was. That's when my sister said something like, "But that's Mama too." This apparently triggered something in my parents, and they tried questioning her more, but it seemed to scare her a bit, so they eased up. I don't think after that we could have moved out any faster. Over the next few days, my parents got more from her, and I learned more as I got older. Kira had explained that Vicky looked just like the person that would visit her at night, except she always had on some kind of gown or robe, maybe. But her hair was always wrapped up like she had it, so she didn't really think about it when we saw her in passing with her hair down. I figured out that when I was under the bed, I most likely saw her jumping out of the window, and that's probably what my parents noticed too. The person was already out of the window when my dad ran to the door. They were gone. Because of the way they were dressed, it was probably why they didn't recognize her either. We had no actual proof that it was her, so nothing ever came about. But it was a creepy situation for us to be in. Especially for my parents, because they could have had a kid abducted, and for me to just witness it all. My sister still to this day did not find it scary whatsoever, but I think it was just because she never really met Vicky in her true form in daylight. It all did cause my parents to be a lot more safe when it came to us, and at least we moved so we never had to deal with her again. I just hope she wasn't able to do that, or anything further, with any other kids. I got my first place shortly after graduating high school in 2009. I already had a stable job that I was working at while in school because they were very flexible when it came to us students, and the pay was decent. After school was out, I started working there full time as I wasn't planning on going to college, at least not immediately after high school. So, I wanted to make more money and save up to get my own apartment. I applied to a few places and finally landed on this cute little house that was actually split into two sides, making it a duplex, I suppose. One side was a 2-bedroom and the other was a 1-bedroom. My side would be the 1-bedroom. My dad came with me when I did the walkthrough to make sure everything was up to snuff for him, and then we met with the landlord, who would also be my neighbor as he happened to be living on the other side of the house. I thought he was around the same age as my parents. He had a buzz-cut style hair, some facial hair, like it had just started growing out, and a pretty average build. But he was short. I was barely over 5 feet, and we were about the same height. It was kind of funny how he had to look up to my dad. We waited out front when we saw him walk out of the other side. He introduced himself as Kelly, and said that he was given the house by his parents, but he knew he wasn't going to need a house that size, and he decided he could turn a profit on it by splitting it. After looking around and discussing rent and responsibilities, I went ahead and accepted it. The rent was decent, as he included the price of the utilities, so all I had to pay for was internet or cable if I chose to do so. I started moving in sometime that same week. My parents helped me, as well as one of my best friends, and even Kelly came over at one point. Once I got everything moved in, my friend stayed over to help me with some boxes, and I ordered pizza. When the doorbell rang, I went to get it and was surprised when I saw Kelly holding my pizza. He said that he saw the guy approaching and thought he would be kind and pay for it as a celebratory meal. He also said that if I ever needed anything, that I could call him or just knock on his door, especially if anything needed repair. I thanked him, and I brought the pizza in, not thinking anything else of it. However, I would soon learn that he wasn't just some generous landlord and helpful neighbor. He seemed to be outside at the same time that I was. When I was leaving for work, he would walk out and say good morning, or he would actually be sitting out front in a chair waving as I drove by. He was also outside when I came home or would knock on the door if he missed me coming home. It was fine for a while, but then it started getting pretty tiring. After I got home, before I would even take my shoes off, I would stand by the door expecting him to be there shortly. I was right. I tried dropping a subtle hint saying that I would be sure to reach out if I needed anything, so that way he didn't have to waste his time coming over all the time. He seemed to get the hint, as I stopped seeing him as much in the morning or when I came home. I ended up having a few friends over one night once I got unpacked and settled in. Kind of like a housewarming party. Now, none of my friends nor I drank. We preferred eating greasy pizza, drinking weird flavored sodas, and playing video games. So, a few hours in, we're all having a good time playing Monopoly, when I heard a knock on my door. It was Kelly. Again. This time he looked annoyed, asking what was going on. I told him I had a few friends over for a housewarming party, and he said something about us being too loud. I apologized, saying that I would keep it down, but before I could do anything else, Kelly was looking over my shoulder and shouting something about the game, and then pretty much let himself in. He sat down, helped himself to one of my root beers, and cracked jokes with a few of my friends. The thing is, he started acting like he was actually getting buzzed. My friends were cracking up, and I was too, but maybe a bit more embarrassed than anything. After some time, I showed him the door, and he left saying that he loved all of us. Shortly after my friends dispersed, The next day, Kelly came over and apologized for how he acted. He said that's why he didn't normally drink. I wasn't about to tell him that it was just root beer, so I just accepted the apology and moved on. It progressively got worse when he would be outside, seemingly drunk, and he would start making comments about me being gorgeous and making someone happy one day. He even asked for a hug one time when my friend was coming over. She teased me later that he probably liked me, which meant I could get away with more. My first thought was, gross, as he looked older, and second, I'm not going to take advantage of that. Then he would apologize the next day, saying that he was embarrassed and that he didn't mean what he had said. I just tried to ignore it and move on. But I guess I didn't put my foot down firmly enough, as he thought it would be okay to even let himself in at times. I called him one time because the toilet seemed to be constantly running, and he asked if he could take a look at it. I was getting ready to leave when he knocked on the door saying he was there to look at the toilet. I had to be somewhere, but I told him that it was fine to fix it and that I would be back shortly. I was gone for a few hours, and yet when I came back, I found him still in my place. I asked him if it was something bad since it had taken so long, and he pretty much just explained yes. He said that he was going to have to get a part, so I couldn't use my toilet, but if I needed to, I could use his bathroom. I thought it was kind of weird, but I agreed and he left for the night. The next day, I was going to my parents to have dinner and do some laundry. I didn't have my own machines yet. And while there, I told my parents about what had happened, and my dad suggested something that was easy to fix. He followed me back to my place and checked the toilet himself, and was able to fix the problem that night. He just chalked it up to Kelly probably not knowing what to do and said that I could call him anytime, since he always did the repairs on the home. I was much more comfortable with that anyways. Kelly seemed to be upset when I told him it had been fixed the next day though, but I mean, he didn't have to fix it or pay for anything, so I didn't understand why. However, he seemed to take this as a chance to do check-ins whenever he wanted. Like, when I was taking a shower and I heard what sounded like a door slamming. I wrapped a towel around me and looked down the hallway into the living room, not seeing anything, and I thought maybe I was just hearing things too, and made my way to my bedroom to get dressed. I had my pants on and a bra, but remembered I had left my lotion in the living room that I had just bought, and it was sitting by my purse. So I went to grab it. And that was when I saw someone standing in my kitchen, and, of course, it was Kelly. I screamed at him, telling him to leave, and he didn't even jump or look scared. He continued to stare at me, smiling, saying that he was just doing rounds to make sure everything was working properly. As I grabbed a pillow, or my jacket that was hanging up, trying to cover myself, I continued screaming at him to get the hell out until he finally dropped his hands and just walked out angrily. I locked the door, went back to finishing getting dressed, and then called him, yelling at him. I told him that he can't just come in anytime he wanted to like that, and how creepy it was, and then mentioned the fact that he didn't even apologize for it. He said he had no reason to apologize, as it was his place, and he could go in anytime he wanted, but that he didn't mean to startle me. I don't know if he just tried taking advantage of me since I was younger, but I'd had enough. I told my parents about it, and my dad suggested that we change the lock. The deadbolt was the same, but he installed a new doorknob. Kelly then threatened to charge me more rent since I wasn't allowed to do that. I told my friends, and I had one of my guy friends stay with me one weekend hoping to deter him, when again he threatened to raise my rent since I had someone living there that wasn't on the lease. Eventually, my parents convinced me to just leave the place. Screw the deposit and get out, as he seemed unsafe, which I agreed. It became a storage place for the most part, for my big items, but otherwise, I moved everything important either back in with my parents or into my friend's place. He continued to text me for some time, but I eventually had to change my phone number as he would not let up. There wasn't anything really in writing, though, which I suppose should have been a red flag from the start, but because of this, he didn't really have any options to take me to court. I just wanted out of that place for good. Thankfully, I never had any other creepy neighbors or landlords like that afterwards, and I hope to maintain that streak. So this was the collection of creepy neighbor stories. The collection of stories that won the poll last month. The poll back in April that you guys all voted for, and this is the topic that won for the final video in May. If you haven't yet, there is also a poll on my community tab for the final video in June. I don't remember where it's at, but I think there was one topic that was pretty far ahead. But if you want to go vote in it, go for it, please. That one closes end of May, so a couple days. And then after that, it's whatever happens in June, whatever wins happens in June. And then in June, I'll start another poll for July. So I really do like doing these polls for you guys, having you guys choose the final topic. It just seems, it's like a good community interaction. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit that bell notification icon thingy, whatever you want to call it. And leave me a comment down below telling me about any neighbors you had that were weird. Doesn't have to be specific, doesn't have to be a story. I just want to know if you had a weird neighbor. That's about it. So, all that said, friends, I hope that you all have a gorgeous day. Gorgeous day. And I hope I see you on the next video. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are important, you are valid, and you are the most bestest you can be. Never will there be a better you that is unbestest than you are. Be you. Be happy. Enjoy life. Live. Whatever I'm trying to say. I don't know. Anyways, until next time, friends. Sleep well.